look like I'm looking a million miles away right now, but I'm really just looking at another screen over here that I'm driving the call from. And so you'll forgive me, I'm not looking longingly out the window, but we're going to go ahead and get us started with our program today. And so I'll kick us off. My name is Jeffrey Kurtzman, and my pronouns are he, him. I'm wearing a mic'd headset, reading glasses, and a blue dress shirt that's unbuttoned at the neck collar. Um, also have a tightly trimmed beard and mustache, and I'm a white guy. I'm joining the call today from my home office in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which does sit atop land historically stewarded by the Ocheta-Midwakaton tribe. So I do want to particularly thank the Midwakaton Sioux tribe for its continued stewardship of much of the land in the Twin Cities metro area. I've been in the D&I space for a little over 30 years. For those of you who are on the call or familiar with HR certifications, I maintain my senior and global professional in human resource certifications from HRCI. You might learn more about me as we go through the program, but I'll make sure it's all relevant to our conversation today. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Larry to do a quick introduction as well.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and good afternoon and welcome. My name is Larry Baker, pronouns he, him. I am wearing a gray sports coat with the maroon button-up shirt, black reading glasses. Okay, who am I fooling? They are prescription glasses. And I am joining you from the call from Chicago, Illinois. Well, technically outside of Chicago, but every time I tell people exactly where I'm from, the first question is, well, how close is that to Chicago? So I just decided to eliminate the middle person and say I'm from Chicago. I bring you 22 some odd years of experience in the learning and development space, primarily around leadership development, executive coaching, human performance improvement, and of course, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I serve as a consultant and facilitator for this organization called Language and Culture Worldwide. I am one of the primary facilitators on these workshops that we are going to discuss with you. I will absolutely admit that these are workshops that I absolutely enjoy and bring passion around each and every session that we do. So welcome, and I'll kick it back over to Jeffrey to give a little bit of an intro and how we will flow with the session. So Jeffrey, if you could.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. I just want to take a quick moment and introduce LCW to those of you who might be less familiar. And while I do that, I'm also going to launch a poll, which you should see appearing now on screen. That's just going to ask you to vote for any or all of these that might be a goal that you have for joining our call today. So we'll leave that poll up for a few moments. LCW is a global D&I training, consulting, and translation firm, and we've been partnering with companies that operate globally to develop mindsets, skills, and systems to succeed in a culturally diverse world since 2000. We've always grounded our solutions in building cultural competence at the individual, leader, and organizational level. And we also support the people working at our clients with instructor-led solutions, digital learning, toolkits designed to build the skill sets needed to sustain meaningful levels of inclusion and equity in workplaces around the globe today. We've got about 75% of the folks on the call who've participated in the poll. We want to see that number go up just a little bit before we share the results. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll and just share the results so that you can see how you voted in comparison to your peers on the call. So it looks like the biggest vote getter is developing understanding among ourselves around the topics, followed by gaining insight to support colleagues and possibly exploring bringing solutions to your organization. So I know some of you might be looking at your own development and at the same time wearing that dual cap of perhaps looking at what ways might these programs be of value to your organization and the work within your organization. So thanks, I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. It should close automatically on screen. If it doesn't close for you, you might need to click a little red X button at the top left or top right of that poll. So a little bit about what we want to accomplish today. We're going to model for you a couple of activities from two different programs that Larry and I both work frequently facilitating a number of programs. And so we want to highlight two programs for you throughout this 1 hour event. We're going to explore the skill sets that inclusive managers, strategic leaders, and all members of our teams need to promote inclusion and drive equity throughout our organizations. And so in particular, we're going to share a couple of activities. One from Cultural Immersion program, Understanding the Black Experience, which is a 4-hour intensive program. It's often done in one 5-hour block with an hour break in between, where many organizations will do two 2-hour blocks, maybe one day following another day. And whether the audience is people leaders, HR professionals, senior executives, ERG members or leaders, or individual contributors, the goal is to more fully understand the history and experiences that influence and affect our Black and African American colleagues. The other program that we're going to highlight an activity from is what we call Upskilling Your Ally Voice, a Q&A about the Black experience in America. It is a 1.5-hour experience designed for individuals who've completed that Understanding the Black Experience program. So it's sort of an add-on to enhance the conversation that begins in that 4-hour intensive. And it is designed for folks, particularly who have been through that program, to build their ally muscle, their motivation, and their capacity to responding to what might be sometimes a difficult or complex questions about understanding the Black experience. It's important to note that this second section, or this second session, really is a workshop program, much more than a presentation. So it really is kind of a hands-on, giving the participants an opportunity to practice, well, how might you respond to a particular question? And for all of these programs, I just wanted to point out to you that we usually run two facilitators. One will be a member of the cultural or community group that we're talking about, that has subject matter expertise in that specific population. And one is a co-facilitator who's not from that population, who fits in the ally or accomplice role, if you will, who collaborates with that learning environment. And so when Larry and I work together facilitating these programs, I will often sit in that ally or accomplice or advocate role in the programs. So those are the two things that we want to accomplish. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Larry, who's going to frame the first activity and then get us started in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. And one of the things that we try to accomplish in understanding the Black experience is that we really seek to provide a greater and more complex understanding of the African American culture, put some things into context, talk about achievements, ambitions, different talents, values, and goals. And one way that we are going to emulate some of those things that happen in that session is to share with you some insights from some recent headlines that are actually impacting the Black community to this very day. And as you'll notice, we have a mixture, because when we talk about the Black experience, far too often people look at it strictly in the sense of doom and gloom. But the reality is there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of resilience that's within this experience that we have as a Black community. So some things that we are highlighting for this particular bit of information is that today is election day. And the reality is, in 5 states, slavery is on the ballot, because a lot of people don't understand that within the 13th Amendment, it does say that slavery is still permissible if you are convicted of a crime. And there are actually 5 states that are petitioning that they need to continue to use this criminality clause, if you will, to keep that service from those individuals that are in prison. Wakanda Forever, the part 2 to the Marvel Comics series is going to be coming out this Friday. It is going to be met with a lot of great anticipation. And it's really proof that when industries do try to talk about, if we cater to the Black community, how will this profit our business? And this is one great example that when you create products that speak to our culture, we tend to support it. But then there's the reality that this experience, this Black experience, is surrounded by violence. There are bomb threats that have been impacting the HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities. They've received 57 bomb threats throughout this year, primarily at schools like Howard and Jackson State and Spelman College, which are some of the more popular HBCUs. Again, tying into voting, there are many candidates across the country that are looking to the Black community to help them during this midterm season. Military bases, the Defense Secretary, Mr. Austin, has declared that, yeah, there are some of these bases that, because of the names that they've been given, they're going to be looking to rename some of those military bases. And then the Black community is watching, because the question has come up, where is that $200 billion that all of these companies that made these splashy announcements back in June of 2020 that they pledged? They pledged to distribute these funds over the next 3 to 5 years, and 27 months later, the question is being asked, where is it? And then something else that relates to the workplace is this phenomenon called quiet quitting. And in the Black community, we kind of miss that, because we do have this realization that, yeah, there's this double standard in the workplace, and that really isn't an issue that we were concerned about, because in our culture, in our community, there is this feeling that we have to work twice as hard to get half as far when it comes to those accomplishments in the workplace. So for us, quiet quitting is probably not a realistic experience that we have, simply because of the scrutiny that we typically receive within our workplaces. I want to walk you through an activity that we do in the Black experience that is going to require that you use one of the functions that's in Zoom. It's called the annotate function. And if you are not familiar with that, we have a little bit of a tutoring session on the slide. And if for some reason you cannot figure it out, please don't let that stop you from participating in this activity, because I really think that this is an activity that kind of ties in a lot of concepts of that particular workshop. So how you access the annotate function is at the top of your screen. You will see a Black little square that says view options. Go ahead and click on that. It will give you a pull down window. You will see one of your options says annotate. Go ahead and select that. It will then give you a taskbar where I need you to select the letter T for text. Now, I know that some of you see the squiggly line that says draw, and you're getting super excited because you really want to use the draw functionality. Please don't, because you're not good at it. And I know some of you are thinking to yourself, but Larry, you've never seen me use draw. I've seen enough people attempt to use draw that I can come to this educated conclusion that you're not going to be good at it. So let's just use text so we can make this example go by a lot smoother, and hopefully are a lot faster. So here's what I like to do. So on this next slide, I need for you on the left-hand side of the screen, I just want you to start typing in some names of some famous Black peoples. Don't just rattle them off as they come into your head. Famous Black people that you know, throw them on the slide so we can just kick this activity off. Oprah Winfrey, there we go. Ida B. Wells, who else? Keep them coming. Serena, Beyonce. It took a while for Queen Bee to show up. I'm appreciating the fact that she came so soon. Barack Obama, Harriet Tubman, Serena Williams, Michael Jordan. We're getting a little bumbled up. Rosa Parks. Okay, Rihanna. Okay, so I'm noticing a little bit of a trend. I'm noticing that a lot of these famous, Frank Thomas, I think somebody from Chicago is here, because there's only a few people that would put Frank Thomas up there, because I can appreciate that name as well. I'm noticing a trend with these names. I'm noticing you're giving me a lot of athletes and actors and civil rights activists. and individuals from like the entertainment industry. But folks like inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs, business leaders, and industry giants, they're kind of not showing up. So what I'd like to do on the right-hand side of the screen is restrict you to only listing the names of famous Black inventors or innovators or entrepreneurs or business leaders or doctors or lawyers, things of that nature. So go ahead on the left-hand side of the screen, start doing that. So George Washington Carver, who else? Madam C.J. Walker, Carla Harris, George Ford. Okay, Johnny Cochran, Katherine Johnson, Duke Ellington. I'm gonna say he's more of an entertainer. Chef Eric Williams, not familiar with him, but thank you. Now I have somebody I need to go and research. Booker T. Washington. Okay, I'll go with that. Frederick Douglass, Marvin Ellison, Ben Carson. Okay. Let's see. Okay, Ketanji Brown. Okay, so you're coming up with these names, but that list is a little bit harder to come up with. And believe me, you are not the only group of folks that when we ask you to limit famous Black people to inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs, business leaders, and industry giants, that list is often more difficult to put together. And unfortunately, the primary reason for that is because most of the Black people that we are familiar with, they're typically athletes, musicians, politicians, social activists. And those individuals that are making contributions to business and science and innovation, they're less familiar. It's almost as if these Black stories are silenced, or in many cases, they're washed away. And therefore, Black History Month and other focused learning initiatives like this one, so important. So because we care about you and what we do in our session is to provide that awareness, I'd like for you to engage in this next activity. Now, for this next activity, I am going to give each and every one of you permission to use your cell phones. Now, I know for some of you, you're going to have to go and find your cell phone because you are so dedicated to this hour that you don't even know where your cell phone is. So I'm going to give you a moment to go and find that cell phone, because what I need you to do is to do a Google search or whatever search engine you prefer on these individuals that we have listed on the screen. And you don't have to go in any particular order, but when you find them and you find out something interesting about that person, go ahead and put a little stamp in their photo. It could be a star, it could be a check mark, it could be a heart, whatever you desire. But I want you to go through and research as many of these individuals as you can. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to invite some folks to come off the line, to take themselves off of mute and tell me what you found out about somebody that you researched that you thought was interesting. So, go. And again, you don't have to go in any particular order because we need Lonnie Johnson, Dr. Patricia Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. I'm assuming Dr. Shirley Jackson has been researched. And I think we only need Dr. Daniel Hale Williams. So so Dr. Daniel Hale Williams has been researched and found. So thank you for the first half of this activity. The second half is where you come into play. Please, someone, or maybe a couple of you, please turn your camera on, take yourself off of mute. Tell me who you researched and what interesting you found out about that individual. Who will go first?
Mary
Now I
did.
failed to tell. Okay, go ahead. Roz, I heard Roz So Roz, go ahead and tell us who you researched and what you found out interesting about that person.
Mary Davison, did not
Oh.
know as a Black woman that she had created 5 different patents, and it looks like around 1950s. So one, if probably not the only, to have that many patents as a woman of color. So really interested to learn that information.
Yeah, and one of her inventions are extremely important to not just women of color, but all women, right? So Mary Davidson is an extremely important individual as an inventor. So thank you so much, Roz. Who will go next? Please take yourself off of mute, turn on your camera. Tell me who you researched and what you found out.
Jill turned their camera on.
Jill did?
I did, because I did not know that Lonnie Johnson invented the super soaker. Very important thing to know.
Absolutely, extremely important. And Jill, he did some other stuff too. Like, he's technically a genius. He worked at NASA.
He invented a lot of stuff.
None of that stuff is really that important. As a kid growing up on the south side of Chicago, in the summertime, if you didn't have a super soaker, yeah, you just knew you were losing all the water fights.
You just stay home.
I thank Lonnie Johnson very much so. Maybe one more person. Take yourself off of mute. Tell me who you researched and what did you find out about that person?
Could I go ahead and note Dr. Patricia Bath?
Yeah, go ahead.
A lot of inequality within the healthcare system as is. So knowing that she was, she changed the face of medicine, and the inventions she was able to put forth are really massive.
Yeah, so to elaborate on that, she created the tool that helps make laser phaco surgery more, well, I'm not going to say, well, it is more precise and less painful, right? So she didn't create cataract surgery, but the tool that they use to conduct cataract surgery, that's her invention. So thank you so much for bringing that out. And the reason why, and thank you all for volunteering and doing some research. The reason why we do this in this activity is because we want to show that Black people have made some extremely significant contributions to our society and our culture. As a matter of fact, it's not just core to Black history, it's core to American history. And this exercise is just one way that we demonstrate how much Black intelligence is a very large part of the American story. There are so many Black people in this diaspora whose work makes a difference in our everyday lives, like Dr. Marianne Croak, who developed voice over IP. She's the reason why we're able to talk to each other over these computers. And medical inventors like Otis Boykin with the pacemaker and Dr. Bath that we mentioned earlier. So we really share this information to let individuals know that Black people have done more than sports and music and civil rights. And I want to share with you an interesting video that really brings home this point a little bit more succinctly. So Jeffrey, if you could.
Nice. You did the 2 things we always talk about. What's that? You worked hard and you
have fun.
Have fun, my man.
It's a real star you got there.
Thanks.
Take care of those hands. They're taking you places.
I got hands. I'm gonna go pro.
You definitely could.
Easy money.
Easy money. Have you ever thought about what else you could be? Go along, son. You could be a brain surgeon. Your hands could operate as skillfully as Dr. Myron Rowe. Or a sports agent, handling big contracts, like Rich Paul. What about an artist? You can be as creative as Brian Blue the Great. The art you make could inspire the world. Son, you can even be an astronaut, flying in space with Leland D. Melvin. Sure, with those hands, you could play for a team, but you could buy a team. Ownership. Get to wear the rings first.
I can do all that, Dad?
You can be anything you want with these hands.
I think this series, Widening the Screen, does so much to present Black people in our full, true selves. And I think that that's some of the things that are beneficial to the sessions that we present when we talk about understanding the Black experience. Another thing that we do is we really do a good job of showing how there's this unbroken thread of history that started for our culture in 1619, and that there are trials and tribulations that didn't just end with the ending of slavery in 1865, that there are so many things that have been threaded through our history that still impacts the Black community today. And I believe that we do a very good job at bringing those events from the past to the present so that people can truly understand that those things that happened in the past still have a tremendous impact on our community today. So I also wanted to share with you a few things from the session that we speak upon. We give an introduction and we talk about how many organizations are discovering the need and the importance to have these conversations about race at work. We not only give examples of the activity that we provided to you, but we talk about how race and colorism is not just a US thing, that a lot of people are under this misconception that it's a US thing. We talk about how race and colorism impacts the entire world. And then we talk about how to engage in these conversations that may be uncomfortable at first, but we give you some tips and some techniques on how to effectively have these conversations at work. Then we move into having a conversation around the history and some other crucial formative factors that have impacted the Black experience. We go through this long shadow of history where we start at the initial point of slavery and we bring it through to the current events of 2022 and potentially beyond. And we talk about a lot of things that in history tend to not be discussed. And many individuals that walk out of that session, I receive communications to me that say, I never knew about, I've never heard of, that is new information to me. And many of these individuals attended American public schools, but this vital piece of history was never shared with them. So when we go through that detailed walk of the history and the impact and the formative factors and how it has shaped the Black experience, many people are moved simply to come to the realization that there's so much history that they've never been taught. And then we also dig into a couple of other concepts. We talk about how messaging and imagery and stereotypes have impacted the Black community. We talk about advertisement, where we look at the intent and the impact that those advertisements have within the Black community. We talk about stereotypes. We talk about stereotype threat. We talk about coded language. We also talk about ways that you can challenge these stereotypes. And we begin to examine the complexities within the Black identity itself. And then we move into, all right, here's your call to action, if you will. We talk about how we have to move to prepare ourselves to have brave conversations. So we talk about some organizations that are getting it right, and we talk about some organizations that miss the mark. So we talk about a lot of these things that give individuals some action items that they can take with them to continue this journey forward. And then, of course, we provide a newer session that we are using as a complement to understanding the Black experience. It's what we refer to as Upskilling Your Ally Voice, and it is a workshop. And one of the prerequisites is that everyone that goes to this workshop, they have to, number one, be serious about having these courageous and brave conversations. And they look to be, and it's more than an ally. I like to refer to people as being accomplices, because if you understand the dynamic of an accomplice, that accomplice has the belief of, if you're not successful, I'm not successful. If you have an issue, I have an issue. And that's really what this part of the program is designed to do, is to equip you that want to be considered more than an ally, more than someone that stands by your Black and brown colleagues, but you really feel like, yeah, if this isn't successful, then I'm not going to be successful. So I'm going to bring Jeffrey in to give some highlights of this workshop called Upskilling Your Ally Voice. So Jeffrey, if you would.
Thanks, Larry. I also want to share with you, one of that section that you were just talking about is that many people who go through understanding the Black experience, who have not themselves had the Black experience, really do let us know that it has done the role of enhancing their capacity to look at things through the point of view and through the experience that they have not specifically had. So developing that cross-cultural competence capacity to be able to look at someone else's point of view from their point of view, which, knowing we can never know what it's like to truly live someone's lived experience, but we can, from a competency lens, absolutely learn to more effectively look at things through someone else's point of view. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, because Camille mentioned in the chat, in that section, Larry, that you were mentioning, where we talk about, who's hitting it right and who's missing the mark, it's not an either or dynamic, as Camille's mentioning. Nice for that organization to sponsor that, yet a long way to go on their leadership team. So some organizations are at the same time hitting one mark and missing another mark. So that kind of duality of existence, is something that we have to acknowledge as well. So I do want to talk a little bit about this Upskilling Your Ally Voice program, which, again, as Larry mentioned, we only do after participants have taken the Understanding Your Black experience. And the objectives of this program are to give people an opportunity to put to use some of their learning and their takeaways from Understanding the Black experience, to learn a really specific framework that can be helpful when answering complex questions about the Black community specifically, or race in general, or really any complex subject of identity or of salient identity or culture or history, and to learn additional actions that people can take. And so we do identify a framework to use that I'm going to share with you. And it's a 3-step framework. And really, it's a way to kind of analyze a question that somebody has asked you, because, of course, the way in which somebody asks you a question, the framework that they ask the question in, really gives you data points that you can pick up on and key in on and zero in on and use to kind of respond to that question. So the way somebody asks a question often gives you a lot of information about how they're currently thinking about things. So the first step in this 3-step model is to first look for what misconceptions or myths or misunderstandings might be underpinning that question. So rather than just, okay, you've asked me this question, here's a response, kind of analyze the question. Is there a myth, a misconception, or a misunderstanding that's just inherent in the premise of the question that perhaps we need to respond to? So the the things that are underneath the question. The next step would be to look at, is there any particular historical context that might be useful to bring up or be mindful of, or perhaps to reframe when answering this particular question that has come forward. And then the third would be to kind of determine, kind of maybe based on additional data points that have gone on into this conversation, or if it's a question in conversation with someone at work that you have some kind of relationship with, so you know some other things perhaps they've said or asked about conversations related to race or the Black experience specifically. So to kind of take all of that and then decide, well, for this person, based on the relationship that I have, whatever that might be, what do I want to kind of zero in on? So the pro tip that we have for you around this is to really kind of identifying factors in steps 1 and steps 2 first for yourself, so that you can help formulate an answer. Now, everything that you bring up or that you identify, look, these are all the myths that are underneath this question, and this is all the history that's kind of needs to be reframed in this question. You probably can't address all of that. So you do have to kind of narrow it down to, well, then what's the one thing I'm going to hinge my response to on? And then perhaps maybe depending on the relationship that you have, maybe there'll be another point in time when you can drill a little farther down and dig a little deeper into that. And so we have a battery of questions that we have available that continues to grow over time. Oftentimes they are questions that come up in other programs that LCW facilitates. We facilitate all kinds of programs around identity and culture. And so sometimes the database has grown simply because similar questions have kind of come up in other programs that we operate, or we might be delivering programs for a specific audience and something specifically comes up, and we might think this is a great one to add specifically. And we're going to walk through one of those questions that tends to come up. And I'm going to put the question up before you, then I'm going to kind of analyze. We'll hear some myths or misconceptions that are underneath of that question. And then we're going to look at what might be some historical data that's underneath of that question. And then we can provide a sample answer. And right as I was sharing that, I was getting a private message coming in from someone saying, are you going to give us an example of this question? And now they're realizing that, yes, of course we are. So feel free at any point to send a private chat if there's something you want to bring up that maybe you don't want anyone else on the call to see that you were the one who raised it. You can feel free to send Larry or I a private chat. But let's look at this question. So many protests about police killing Black people, but why is no one taking the time or talking about Black on Black crime? So before even responding to this question, we're going to take a few moments and analyze, well, what might be some myths or misconceptions that are underneath of this question. So I think right on the surface, one of the first misconceptions or myths that might be that no one's talking about crime faced by the Black community. And so just sort of acknowledging that, no, there are indeed Black families in predominantly Black neighborhoods, as well as Black families living in neighborhoods that are not predominantly Black, talking about crime that Black people face. So that is indeed a conversation that's going on. So right off the bat, this framework from this questioner is there's not an understanding that these conversations are going on already. And then, of course, connected to that is this term Black on Black crime. So one myth or misconception underneath of this statement is that we talk about crime that impacts different racial groups in the same way, regardless of the racial group being impacted. And that's just not the case. That is indeed a myth. I mean, I don't know if you can think of, but there really isn't any other racial group that we use a frame similar to Black on Black crime. Right? When we talk about crime that's faced by the white community, we tend to just talk about it as crime. When we talk about crime that's faced even by other racial groups, we tend to talk about it as crime. Yet with crime in the Black community, we've got this phrase Black on Black crime. So one is just a myth that we talk about crime in the same way. And really, if you think about where that phrase gets used and who does or doesn't use that frame, I mean, Larry and I facilitate these kinds of conversations as our careers. I have rarely heard a Black person refer to crime in the Black community as Black on Black crime. And it tends to be people who are not Black who use that frame or phrase. And so just that notion. Another piece underneath of this kind of Black on Black crime myth or misconception is that there's something dramatically different going on with crime in the Black community than in other racial groups, or that there's more crime or more violent crime, because the initial part of the question is about killing, right? So the inherent nature of the question is violent crime. When white people initiating violent crimes against other white people tends to happen like almost 3 times more than Black people initiating violent crimes against other Black people. Yet we never talk about this rampant white on white crime that's going on. So just maybe there's some data about stats that we can use to change the narrative of the way in which we think about Black crime. That's another myth. Another history piece that's a misconception here is a false equivalency is getting made. There's sort of 2 frames in this question: police killing Black people and Black people committing crimes against other Black people. And the false equivalency is that these 2 kind of concepts are equal in nature. And quite frankly, they're not. Because one, the second half of that question is talking about the general citizenry committing crimes against other members of the citizenry. And the first part of this question is really talking about the government or representatives of the government committing crimes against the citizenry, and not just any old crimes, but violent crimes against not only the general citizenry, but one particular racial group. So to suggest that when Black people commit crimes against other Black people, it's the same dynamic that's going on as when literally representatives of the government are committing crimes against Black people, and not only just representatives of the government, but literally representatives of the form of government that is charged with protecting all of us, is actually disproportionately killing some of us. Those 2 things are not equivalent. It's sort of like if you've ever gone through a workplace harassment training program and someone has said, well, if a supervisor engages in the same behavior that an employee engages in, we'd expect that there would be greater repercussions on the supervisor, because when the supervisor does it, it's the company doing it. Just like when a member of law enforcement does it, it's the government doing it. So that's another kind of added layer. And one of the things that we learn in the Black Experience program, that's the prerequisite to this, is just the historical violent nature of policing and of policing Black bodies, and of even the origin story of police departments in the United States was to protect the property of white slave owners who were indeed enslaved people. And of course, the origin of that police force is to recapture what many people think of as fugitives, when in reality, to use more modern day language, they were refugees who were fleeing violent enslavement. Yet historically, it's talked about, police need to hunt down these and recapture, right, property that has gone lost. That's the origin story of the police. So there's that historical data point. And so taking all of that, then, how might we respond to a statement like this? And you could really pick any one of those things, depending on how much time do you have with this person? What context does this question come in? Is there 3 minutes that we're waiting before other people are going to join the Zoom call and I want to say something? Do I maybe just make a false equivalency? I don't really know if talking about representatives of the government disproportionately killing Black people, because the data is that Black people are far more likely to be murdered in an engagement with law enforcement than other racial groups. I don't know if that's the same as talking about like members of the citizenry killing. But I think that if that seems, those things don't seem to line up. Maybe we could talk more about that later. Or maybe it's simply a matter of, where did this term Black on Black crime come from? I'm just wondering where that, because like I'm trying to think, like I've never heard somebody talk about white on white crime or native on native crime. So I wonder, like, shouldn't we really just be talking about crime faced by the Black community or members of the Black community? Isn't that maybe like a more a less racially charged term for crime? Because don't all racial groups face crime? So one way to answer a question, of course, is with an appreciative inquiry question, if you have the time to drill deeper down and farther down into a particular nature. So I will pause for a moment because I know I put a lot there, and there's actually a lot more myths and a lot more historical data points that are underneath of this question. This is a very complex question with a lot to unpack that you would really have to kind of narrow down what it is that you want to focus on. So what I'll do is I'll share with you also just kind of quickly, these are some of the battery of questions. I don't think this is the entire database, if you will. Database sounds like it's much larger than it is, but there's a battery of questions that we suggest when someone schedules this program that we suggest, in which 3 to 5 do you want people in your organization to practice responding to? And then which one might you want us to use as a model or example as we share the model and demonstrate to people? And the way the program works is we will share that 3-step model that we shared with you about, and then one of the facilitators will model an answer, and then we will literally put people into breakout groups with a specific question that the employer's D&I team or the project team has helped narrow down to. Okay, we want to have this many people per breakout group, and so we want to use these 3 questions. That means each question is going to be focused on by 2 breakout groups, and we'll actually give those breakout groups a medium amount of time to work through how might you answer. And then when we come back, we'll hit each question and have members of the breakout group share what myths and misconceptions and historical data points maybe were underneath, and then what might your answer have been. So it really is designed to very much be a hands-on, a practical, practicing way to address that. And so what I'll do is I'll just kind of share with you, just like Larry did with the Black Experience program, kind of the overarching agenda of this program and the way we kind of navigate through the content of this program. And then afterwards, we'll share with you just some high-level information about some of the other Black-centered programs that we have, and then we can take some questions if folks have. We also have a closing poll we'd like to ask you as well. And so in this program, there's a kickoff with some introductions of the facilitators, where we just take a few moments to kick that off. Larry and I will share sometimes a little bit more of our backgrounds, or perhaps the pieces that might connect us to whatever the specific program is. We highlight this one. We won't automatically send them into a breakout group. We'll set the breakout so they have to actively click OK to join through the dialog box.
So it appears that Jeffrey,
Before they head in, so that they have those. What's that, Larry?
You are freezing up every once in a while. So I'm standing ready to hop in, but I don't want to steal your thunder because I know you've got this part, but I'm just wanting to let you know that you're freezing.
Thank you. So is it coming off smoothly now?
Yes.
And how much do you think folks didn't catch?
Probably the majority of what you said.
On this slide here?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. You made me sweat for a moment with when we were analyzing what's underneath that past question. Oh boy, I'm going to have to go a lot faster the second round through. So I'll just highlight then quickly, and Larry, take over if I freeze up again. So the learning objectives we go through, we won't automatically put folks into a breakout group. We usually set this Zoom call to have the dialog box pop up that will have a truncated form of the question. So as folks click OK, they can see which question their breakout group is supposed to answer. We encourage folks at this point to take a screenshot or use a handheld device to capture the image of the slide with the breakout instructions, so that when they get into the group, at least one person in the group remembers what's the question we're supposed to answer. And then there'll be a little bit information on, why focus on the Black community and kind of maybe some of the unique circumstances that the Black community is facing, which might have some things in common with other racial communities, but might also be unique to the Black community as well. And then there is an action poll that we'll launch to have folks make some commitments. And so just looking to the question here, I see my colleague, Rebecca Perea, who's on the team that Larry and I work on, the content research and facilitation team, has responded to Camille's question there. So thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate you doing that. And then just looking at Daphne's question. Well, you don't have to focus on Black-centered programming only during Black History Month, Daphne. So while we are framing this for, hey, we have a lot of Black-centered program that you might want to bring in during Black History Month, you might also look at, well, what do we put on a cadence throughout the year that focuses on Black-centered identities and needs and concerns. So let me bring up that next slide, which might help out with that as well. So we have something called Brave Conversations, how to have difficult conversations around race, which can take a Black-centered focus. It can also take a focus of any other particular historically marginalized racial groups' needs or concerns, or it can take just a general focus on having more effective conversations around race. There are some very concrete models that we deliver during that program, developing inclusively what you need to know about your Black talent is for people leaders specifically. So the Brave Conversations can be for anyone. The developing inclusively really is for people leaders specifically. And a lot of the needs and concerns that we make people aware of and help them address and respond to come from a number of focus group programs that we have done with our clients, eliciting specific needs and concerns of that Black talent is facing. And so there's also a wealth of other research and data that we can draw on and tap into that suggests that these are some tendencies that many Black talent might find in common with what some of their experiences are in terms of headwinds that they might face in various environments. We do have an anti-racism toolkit, which is 6 topic-focused facilitated discussions. They're designed to be internally led. Some organizations want to train the trainer program on these discussions. Other organizations want to pick up those discussion guides and have their HRBPs or their ERG representatives, or even some level of their leadership, just facilitate those specific conversations. They're very much mapped out. Here's an agenda for the conversation. Here's a handout for the conversation. Here are some talking points for the conversation. And then also new is a spotlight on the Black community. We have a number of spotlights. We have a spotlight on the disability community, a spotlight on the Asian Pacific Islander community, for example. And so we are now developing also a spotlight on the Black community in the US. And then just navigating back to the chat, I'm thinking that my colleague Rebecca has been responding to all of those chat pieces as I've come through. So feel free to let me know if there's additional questions, or Larry, if there's any piece from any of that content that you want to highlight or underscore that you think might be of value.
Yeah, I mean, primarily for me, all of these pieces are complementary, right? Because what we want to stress to organizations is that this isn't a one and done type of activity. This isn't something that you check the box and you say that you're done. What we are trying to do is to create an environment where individuals feel like they have the capacity and, in most cases, the confidence to engage in these conversations that tend to make people feel uncomfortable. So with our suite of products, they're all designed to help people get more comfortable with being uncomfortable, because none of these are what I would like to call the magic bullet that once you walk out of that session, that's it. You've got everything that you need to handle every situation. What we're doing is we're putting you in a position to be successful, to develop the bravery that you're going to have to challenge those family members, those colleagues, those individuals at the school board meeting, to have conversations that enrich this experience for the Black community, so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the onus isn't just upon us as members of the Black community to have these conversations. So that's really the one thing that I want to drive home about all of these products. If your organization is interested in creating the bravery to move beyond Black History Month, to engage in these conversations in June, July, and August, and to be able to effectively implement change in your organization, then these products are for you.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate that. I'll also add that regardless of the identity population that we focus on, because there's a suite of these programs for varying populations, we inevitably find that someone from that group who goes through the program will also say, I found a way that I can get even more nuanced about how I respond to this, or a tool that I can take away. So as Rebecca's pointing out in the chat, while many of them are designed to give people who want to develop their ally voice for that group, that doesn't mean that folks from that population might not also benefit from that conversation as well. But to Larry's point, we know that we have all of us needing to come together without relying on people from particular populations to move this needle. Looking at the time, we've got just a couple of quick minutes left. So I do want to thank all of you for your time. I'm going to launch a final poll here that's just going to ask you a few questions about your experience during the call today. So there's 3 questions. Each question is multiple choice. We also put the email address on screen there. I'll put it in the chat here. If you want to reach out to get any more specific information about any of these programs, or any program that we might develop. So I see, Camille, your comment about focusing on mental health of Black workers. And so we do want to acknowledge, and I think Rebecca's even pointing this out, the fatigue and exhaustion that can come with constantly facing stereotypes and other forms of both conscious and unconscious bias about your population. So there are components in each program that relate to that, but that wouldn't preclude us from putting together a program for you that looks specifically around what are unique needs, what are our unique health needs of a specific population, whether that's something we call mental health or not. I've always thought it's funny personally that we call mental health when it's, the brain is an organ, and so it's health like any other health, but we do characterize it in that way in our society. But we can certainly develop programming for you. So we are at the top of the hour. I do want to be respectful of folks. I know you might need to head on. We can probably stick on for a few moments if folks do have particular questions, comments, or concerns. Please do complete the poll before you hop off the call. So rather than promptly ending this call and cutting everyone off, we'll give you the opportunity to exit the call at your leisure once you've completed the poll. We really appreciate you taking time today to listen to some of the programming that we have to focus on your own development. For those of you who are shopping things around as well, to consider that. Feel free to reach out if you're one of the folks on the call who from the first poll was thinking about shopping some of the programs. Feel free to reach out to LCW and somebody will calendar time with you to navigate through the content of any program that you're interested in. So I want to thank you very much for your time. I'll turn it over to Larry for a final closeout.
No, thank you so much for your participation in this session. And as I mentioned earlier, these workshops are more than just a facilitated session for me, and I know for Jeffrey as well. This is something that we consider to be really the heart at why we do what we do. So I thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share just a small piece of what that entire program would entail. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Take care.